So the blog is called Adventures from the Bedrooms of African Women, and I started it in January 2009 with one of my very good friends, Malaika. And basically what happened is in December I'd gone on a girls' holiday, right, with a group of other women from different parts of the continent. And we were on the beach, we were chilling, we were drinking cocktails, and we spoke a lot about sex. A lot about sex. And it was about all types of sex, right? Sex with men, sex with women, sex with ourselves. And I was just like, oh my God, how come I've never had this conversation before? And it felt like a really free space. You know, nobody was judging anybody. Nobody was like, oh my God, you did this, or you really want to do that. It was just so free. And for me, it was kind of like mind-blowing. It was just before my 30th birthday, and I'm like, how am I almost a 30-year-old woman? And this is the first time I'm having this kind of conversation with other African women. So I came back all fired up, and I'm like, you know, I'm going to start a blog, and I'm going to blog about African women and sex. So I called my friend Malaika because she was in the States, I was in Ghana, but we have that kind of friendship where even though we hadn't seen each other for a long time, we used to write each other in those days letters. And, you know, tell each other everything that was going on. And she was one of the few people I could sort of speak to openly about sex. And I said, Malaika, I'm going to start a blog, and, you know, I'm going to write about African women and sex and what we do. And we're laughing because we were like, people have all these sort of stereotypes about African women, right? Like we are stiff, we are this, we are that, and I'm like, people have no idea. And she said to me, oh, I've been thinking the same thing, and I want to write a book, and I'm going to call it Adventures from the Bedrooms of African Women. And I said to her, you know what, let's call the blog Adventures from the Bedrooms of African Women, do it together, and later turn it into a book. Right. So that's basically how Adventures started.
Yeah. And from what I read, and also when I was doing a research on you, you also give women space, and also queer women, to come together and to do like this kind of revolution and sexual freedom. Can you explain the listeners and everyone who is interested to come to listen to you tomorrow in the symposium, like the empowerment, and like what is the hope these women come and what they see through your writing, and generally the space you give to them?
Well, that's the whole point of the blog. It's a space for all African women from all backgrounds, from all parts of the continent and the diaspora, right? It's a space where we share our stories. We've written it themselves. It's our truth, you know. So the focus is really on people telling their own personal stories. And obviously, you know, a really important thing is security, because we know that unfortunately a lot of people on the continent are still persecuted for their sexuality. So I choose to write under my own name. A lot of people write anonymously, which I completely understand. You know, also society judges women. Society judges women who choose to have sex. Society judges women who are not in relationships that are seen as the norm, or who are not married, or, you know, there are all sorts of judgments. But the whole idea is that if we're telling our own stories, you can't deny it. It's us, and, you know, it's our truth. So for me, that's the powerful thing about Adventures, right? And it's also become a space where women connect with each other. I've been in like last year I was in Nigeria on a panel. I'm speaking about sexuality, and a young woman came and spoke to me afterwards, and she said, it was through Adventures that I was able to have conversations about sex. Conversations I could never have with my mum, I could never have with my auntie. You know, I've had young married couples tell me that because of Adventures, they have been able to talk about sex. Because, you know, like, I didn't get any sex education growing up, and suddenly you're expected to somehow know what to do. You're somehow expected to know your body. And I mean, for me, the body's important. The body's political, right? If you don't have control over your own body, if in a sense it's like you can't feel pleasure within your own body, if you can't be free within your own body, how can you be free in the world? You know, so for me, that's the Adventures is a political project. It's my personal political project, and I think it's political for women to talk about sex, and I think it's political for women to be able to tell their own stories and to be able to speak to each other. You know, so whatever your sexuality, however you identify as a woman, whether you're straight, whether you're trans, whether you're queer, Adventures is a space for all women.
Yeah, one of your articles on your blog, it was written somewhere there, it it's talking about the religion propaganda or the colonial mentality that is hidden about actual sexual identity, and which is when we know where Christianity come from. I remember in my mother's room there is this big Jesus picture, and he's white, blonde and blue eyes, and she's really connected, this Jesus who's white, and she's connected to her daily life, and it's all like not committing sins, it's really coming from the colonialism and this colonial and the religion propaganda. Can you maybe tell us to our listener more about how like the African sexuality, how they try also to be like in whole identity, but to separate with this religion propaganda and the colonial mentality? General.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head. You know, I feel like for me, one of the biggest challenges we have is just the rise of religious fundamentalisms, and it comes in all shapes and stripes. You know, the media love to talk about Islamic fundamentalism. People don't speak as much about Christian fundamentalism, Hindu fundamentalism, like any kind of religious fundamentalism really is a problem, right? And what fundamentalists try to do is control women's bodies, you know, and that's a huge issue. I mean, in Ghana, we have pastors who are literally picking public fights with women activists and saying, you're a slut, you're not married, you know, how dare you speak up, you know, and these are powerful men. These are powerful men with a lot of influence in the society, with a lot of influence with huge mega churches and congregations, and it's an issue. At the same time, you know, these are the people who are turning around and abusing people in their congregation, you know. Women especially. It's a huge issue. It's a huge issue.
And how is your blog was received by this patriarchal community? Or like, I can imagine it's like throwing stones, and you know, you have to challenge like this dominance, especially men. And can you maybe tell again to our listeners like the challenge and also your success and the hopes for the future generally?
For me, I think the great thing about having a blog is you have an online space that you're able to in a sense mold and shape, and you have a community that's formed. And one of the things that's been really great about Adventures is how the community has protected that space actually. So Adventures people on Adventures that literally do not allow people to come in and detract from what we're trying to do. I don't even have to regulate people. Somebody comes and writes a stupid comment and somebody will say, if you don't want to be part of this conversation, leave. You know, so the space is very, very much sort of controlled by the community, which has been amazing. And I mean, I'm a big fan of ignoring the trolls. You know, if you make a silly comment and I realize you're not here to truly engage and you're not really interested in discussing, I just mark you as spam. You know, so actually I have found the reception to Adventures to be very, very positive. Lots of young people especially appreciate it, like it. I found the media to be supportive. I've been on radio, I've been on TV. So I haven't had an issue personally. Maybe somehow, you know, it's the privilege of, you know, being a middle class woman, but it's been completely fine for me for the most part.
Yeah, and you have also space for queer. Also, I have to remind our listeners that tomorrow we will also be on panel where we will talk about queer and feminism and future perspective. You give also space for queer to explain their sexuality or freedom. And do you face challenges, as we know that homosexuality is not fully accepted in Africa? Or this space for queer, are they safe, or how is it for you, interaction with the queer community? Yeah,
I mean, in Ghana, you know, a lot of people who are queer are not going to openly identify as queer for skewed reasons, and that's completely understandable. It's not an issue. You know?
Straight up.
Exactly. But the way I see it, right, I mean, I think people like to think of queer as those people out there. I have a much more sort of, I guess, open approach to how I define queerness as people who are living their lives to be fully free and to be themselves and are not trying to stick to rigidly what society says we should do. You know? So there's a huge spectrum in queerness, the way I see it personally. And for me, that's what's important to center, right? To center our lives, actually. you know, just how they are, and not to try and fit into a box, and just to be free, you know. And I acknowledge that some people are able to do that more openly and freely than others, and I think I am, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. Maybe you can tell the people can make it tomorrow or even today, your blog, because I was really lost reading everything that you post. Maybe you can give the address at the online.
Sure.
Link.
So I'll repeat the name again because it's very easy to find via Google. Adventures from the Bedrooms of African Women. And the URL is www.adventuresfrom.com. So adventures with an S on the end, from.com. But if you forget, just search for Adventures from the Bedrooms of African Women and it'll pop up.
Thank you.